Welcome to a brand new series we're calling Cliché Christianity. I want to welcome our Sapulpa and Aquita campuses and our online viewers. I'm glad you're along for this journey with us. You know what a cliché is. You may not be able to define it, but you know one when you hear it. In fact, why don't you just work with me here a little bit and finish these as we go along. If you know the cliché, you just finish it. The acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. Come on, at all of our campuses, everybody together. Actions speak louder than words. Good. Another day, another dollar. Exactly. You got the idea. Finish a couple more of these. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Exactly. You can't judge a book by its cover. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. The early bird catches the worm. You get the idea. We all know those slogans, those proverbs, those cliches, those phrases that get used, and we just use them sometimes without even knowing it. We just say things and it becomes a means of communication. In fact, if you've ever traveled in another country and you may have found yourself saying something that people then have to ask, or an interpreter looks at you and says, what are you saying? Because they don't understand the American cliche that you're using. And you may have noticed, especially if you're new to church and new to this faith thing, that cliches get used even in Christianity. They get used at church. In fact, we're going to spend the next few weeks just talking about how cliches get used among Christians and inside of the church. And we're going to laugh at ourselves and we're going to have a good time with that. But we're also, I think, going to point ourselves to some truths and help us maybe to communicate and to care for people just a little bit better. Today, we're going to talk about when Christians use cliches to comfort people in times where they're hurting, or in times where they're grieving, or in difficult or painful kinds of situations. And it is easy, if we're not careful, to kind of fall into a cliche mode where we just repeat things that we've heard and share them with people as truths and hope that that's going to help in some capacity. I know why we do it. I know why. I think it comes from a sincere desire to want to help people. We want to be able to give them some words of comfort, or maybe some words of wisdom, or to help in some capacity because they're going through a difficult time. We also just have this need, I think, to say something. We want to be able to say something to them. We may not know what to say to them, and so we just revert to something that we've heard, or something that we know, or something that's been repeated. And then, quite honestly, some of you are just the talk before you think kind of personality. If you're married to one of those, go ahead and raise your hand. No, probably not a good idea. But you know who you are, or at least your spouse knows who you are if you're that kind of person. So when a friend or a family member is going through a difficult time, it's easy for us to do one of two things. For some people, it's easy, instead of helping, that we tend to withdraw from them. We don't know what to say, and so we don't say anything. On the other hand, there are more people that tend to say too much. We want to be helpful and we want to say something, and so we tend to say too much. And that just becomes a kind of a sign of our culture. We can become cliche Christians. In fact, I don't know if you've noticed this, but if you listen to some of the most listened to preachers, you'll notice that there are cliches that are just kind of repeated through their sermons. Some of the most sought after, most listened to preachers, some of the most popular preachers right now, their sermons are just full of these popular sayings that we like to hear. And we have become comfortable in that becoming a part of our culture, a part of the Christian culture. And before we pick too much on ourselves as Christians, it's true of just about any part of culture. In fact, if we really want to pick on somebody, let's pick on the country music industry. I mean, I know some of you are country music fans. You go ahead and tell us, let us know. If you're a country music fan, I've got a question for you. How many times can you spend a moonlight on the back of a tailgate of your four-wheel drive pickup with your farmer's daughter girlfriend in her cutoffs after having a beer and a chicken fried steak? I mean, how many times does that really, really happen? And so it's not just in Christianity, and it's certainly not in country music. Thank you for letting me just poke fun at you just a little bit. It's true of everything. It's easy to make cliches a part of the way that we communicate. So let's define what that is, especially in what we're talking about today. Cliches are simply oversimplifications of reality that we use in order not to deal with uncomfortable facts. It is just an oversimplification. Sometimes there's a lot of truth to that cliche. Sometimes it carries just a little bit of truth. Sometimes it distorts the truth. But it's an oversimplification of truth, of reality, and we use it so as to get by with dealing with just the least amount of uncomfortableness. We want to get out of the situation, and so we want to share with it just this simple fact, and it often is, if not a distortion of the truth, at least the wrong time to say it. And so let's talk about some of the cliches that often get used by Christians in times of grief when we want to help and when we want to comfort somebody. You've probably heard this one. You have probably honestly said this at some point when there's been a death. You've said to somebody, they're in a better place now. It sounds like such a good thing to say to people, to remind them that, you know, they're not hurting anymore. They're in a better place. They're in heaven. That's what we're wanting to say. But honestly, that's probably not the best time to say it after somebody has died, because it doesn't make any difference in they're a better place. We still have lost that person. We still are grieving the loss and the separation of that person being gone, and it's not the time to say, well, that person is in a better place. Or here's one that I've heard before: God must have needed them more than us. Now, quite honestly, this one's just wrong theologically. Okay, this one doesn't have any truth. God doesn't need any of us. God certainly doesn't need any of us in heaven before others of us. And so this one might be one that we use just to make ourselves feel better and then try to pass on to somebody else. But this one's just wrong. And to say God must have needed them as a means of trying to bring some kind of comfort. And it's related to this one right here. Well, God needed another angel. Sometimes this one gets used when there's been a young person or a child that's died. God just needed another angel. And again, it gets used because it makes us feel good. It makes us feel better, that there must be some kind of purpose or meaning behind this. But the truth behind it is completely wrong. The reality behind it is wrong. God doesn't need children to die. It may be a part of us living in a fallen world, but God doesn't take people prematurely because He needs them. Or maybe you've heard this one right here: God won't give you any more than you can handle. God's not gonna hurt, not gonna cause any more grief. And I understand what's meant by it, but it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel that way when you're going through it. It feels like it's more than you can handle right now. Or maybe this one right here: everything happens for a reason. I find Christians often say this one. Everything happens for a reason. I don't know that they believe that, because I don't believe that statement. I don't believe everything happens for a reason. I believe things happen because we have an enemy. I believe things happen because we live in a fallen, sin-stained world. I believe things happen because God gives people free will and they do evil things. But not everything happens for a reason. But I think most people mean by it is God can do something good with this. And though that may be a truth, it's often not the best time to say it after somebody's been through some kind of tragedy. Or this one goes along with it: it must be God's will. There's been a death, or there's been a tragedy, or there's been a loss of some kind, and somebody comes along well-meaning and says, well, it must be God's will. Well, obviously God allowed that particular event to happen. That is the truth. But I don't ever believe it's God's will for terrible things to happen to people, for children to die, for there to be loss of innocent life, injustices. They may have happened, but they're not along with God's plan and what God's desire. They're again a part of living in a sin-stained, empty world. And so here's the truth about those kind of things. I'm honestly tired of hearing Christians say things that are just shallow, things that are empty, hollow platitudes, things that we just use to try to make ourselves feel better or to make other people feel better. And quite honestly, those kinds of things at the most inopportune times are offensive to people. They give a wrong kind of message. They say the wrong kind of thing. They leave the wrong kind of taste of what Christianity is about. And quite honestly, most of them are not true. They're not biblical. And so let me just say this. Quit saying that kind of stuff. When you're walking through with someone who's going through some kind of grief or difficulty, quit saying those kinds of things to them. We'll talk a little bit more about things to say in just a minute, but the truth is we don't just tell other people those thoughts. Sometimes we tell ourselves that. Sometimes those are things that we have come to believe ourselves and things that we tell ourselves as we're going through difficulties, and so then we just pass them on to other people. And again, it's not the right time, and often it's not even the right truth to be able to share with them at that particular time. In fact, let's go on and let's just talk about some things not to say. Let's generalize this just a little bit. Things not to say when you're wanting to comfort someone who's going through a difficulty or a hard time. Don't say anything that minimizes their pain. Don't say anything that would cause them to think that what they're going through is too much, or they're making too big a deal about it, or they're feeling too strongly about it. Don't do anything that would say to them that what they're going through, it really isn't as bad as what it seems. That's kind of what we want people to be okay. We want them to feel okay. And so we'll say things. Well, it's going to be okay. It's probably for their best. Well, things could be worse. Well, you're young, you can get over it. Those are the wrong kinds of things, because when someone's going through that kind of difficulty, you are minimizing the pain that they are going through at the moment, and that is not going to help them to get through that difficulty. Don't say anything that would minimize their pain. Don't tell them how to feel or how not to feel. You shouldn't feel that way. I know, don't feel that way. When we tell people not to feel a certain way, or we tell them that they need to feel this way about it, it makes us an expert. It minimizes the things that they're going on. It is just a reflection of our own discomfort and our own struggle through whatever it is to try to say, don't feel that way. Their feelings are true. They can't control what they are feeling and the emotions that they are going through at the moment. There will be a time where we speak truth into their life, but at the moment when they're going through a difficulty, we don't want to minimize what they're feeling. Along with it, don't try to answer their why questions. Now, this is where Christians get into trouble, because we want to help. We want people to understand God. We want people to understand faith and how the two can be reconciled. And so we're often quick to try to step in and explain how things work. But the truth is, you don't have the answer. I don't have the answer. And even if we did have a really good answer, we talked a little bit about this last week at the tail end of our science class. Even if we had a good answer of how a good God could let evil and suffering take place, even if we had a good answer, it's not a good time to share it with people when they're going through those kinds of things. And so don't try to answer the why questions. You allow the why questions to happen, and you express your feelings of injustice over the difficulty of the why question and your challenge of working through the why questions, but don't try to answer their why questions. And lastly, don't try to give spiritual answers. Again, we typically kind of want to jump to help. We want to give some kind of spiritual truth. We want to help by saying some profound word, and so things come out of our mouth like, well, this is going to make you a stronger person, or you're going to find some meaning in this, or God's going to use this for some kind of good in the future. And probably all true things, probably all good things, but not things to say at that time, not appropriate for that time. In fact, when people are at all-time lows, what they really need is someone to cry with them and somebody to agree with them over the injustice that they see. Not try to fix it, not try to explain it away, but just to mourn with them and just to agree with what they're feeling and what they're working through. And so this is the honest truth. You don't have to say something. When you get word that you have a friend that lost a parent or lost a friend, or when they've gone through some kind of difficulty, you've got a friend that's gone through a divorce and you've just heard about it, you don't need to go over and to say some words of wisdom or words of counsel. There'll be some kind of time for that. What they need is your presence. They need is just someone to sit with them, to be with them and just be there, simply be there for that hurting person. I want you to take the Old Testament character of Job, for example. Again, we talked about Job when we were dealing with the problem of suffering and evil. But let's take his friends, for example, good friends that he had that came and they started out by doing the right thing. You remember the story of Job. Job has lots of stuff. He has a great family, a big family. He's a rich man, has lots of land, lots of livestock. And because of a supernatural battle that's taking place, God allows Satan to wreak havoc in Job's life. And Job loses almost everything. And he is distraught with grief. Very end of chapter 2 in the book of Job tells us that when Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, when they heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and they met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and to comfort him. Three good friends hear about what has happened to Job, and one of the things that they do is immediately go to him and say, we're going to be a source of sympathy and comfort for him. Listen to what happens. When they saw him from a distance, they've all met together, they're all coming together, they could hardly recognize him. That's what happens often is when we're grieving, isn't it? You've noticed that about people that have gone through maybe a long terminal disease with a spouse or a parent, and you just look at them and you can tell that they have aged, and you can tell that they're tired and that they're worn out, that they've been crying. That's exactly what's happened. Job's friends, they hardly recognize him because life has done this to him, and they begin to weep aloud. That's the three friends. They begin to weep aloud. And they tore their robes and they sprinkled dust on their heads. Now, what's that all about? What does all that mean? That was just a sign of grieving. For us, tears that flow are a sign of our grief and our feelings of mourning and loss. But in the Old Testament times, they would tear their clothes to express that emotion. They would sprinkle dust and ashes on their head to express that emotion. And listen to this. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. They just sat with him. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. Job has some good friends, 3 good friends right here, and they did some things that were really right. They get a bad rap, and some of it deservedly so, but they did some things that were really good. First off, Job's friends came to him. They went to him and they stayed with him. They didn't send a note. They didn't call. They didn't send somebody else. They didn't ask the preacher to go by or somebody else. They just went themselves to be with a friend in time of need. That's a great thing to do when you have a friend that's working through some kind of difficulty. Here's the next thing they did. When they saw the toil that Job's suffering was put upon him and having on him, they wept loudly, they tore their robes, they threw dust over their head, all gestures of mourning. What they're doing is they are identifying themselves with the grief that Job was going through. There is nothing better than you can do than just to cry with people. Just to identify and to feel alongside of them their loss. That's what Job's friends did. Then they sat on the ground with Job for 7 days and 7 nights. I can't remember sitting that long ever in my life. I may have sat for an afternoon or for most of a day with someone that was hurt and someone that had lost a friend, but they sat on the ground for an entire week. And then they said nothing. That may have been the best thing that these friends did. They were men of great wisdom, and they realized that nothing that they could say would make Job feel any better, and so they just sat in their silence and they gave Job the best thing that they could give, their presence and their companionship. If that had been the end of the story, that would have been great for them. But unfortunately, when they messed up was when they responded to Job, because the next chapter, Job begins to express how he's feeling. And instead of going along and validating his feelings and expressing their understanding of that, they jumped in. And so instead of remaining silent and mourning with him, they responded to him. And ultimately, Job was going to say, "Miserable comforters are you all," because they had to open their mouths. You do not have to say anything to someone that's going through grief. In fact, the best thing that you can do is just to keep your mouth shut and to just be there. You know, my mom passed away about 8 years ago. It was unexpected, something that just hit my family out of the blue. And it was shortly thereafter that we were planning a funeral and at a funeral. We were 4 hours away from the Tulsa area. And one of the most meaningful things that has happened and I have received comfort from my church family, was when some of you drove to Hutchinson, Kansas to be at my mother's funeral, to just be with me and my family. You drove 4 hours, and honestly, some of you, we never even spoke there. You may have waved at me. I may have waved at you. I was visiting with family and comforting other people and crying myself. And so some of you, you drove 4 hours, you sat through the funeral, and you turned around and you drove back home, and we never even spoke. And we didn't have to. Because your presence meant more to me and to my family than anything you could have said. And that's exactly what happens with Job. And that's exactly what happens when you do it with other people, is when you walk into that painful situation and you are just there. And you're slow to speak and you're quick to listen and you just cry and you hug and you do whatever you can. You know, when Jesus had a good friend that died, you remember the story in John chapter 11? A man named Lazarus. Not just a follower of Jesus, but a friend of Jesus. And he had two sisters, Mary and Martha, and they were all friends. They'd been good to one another. And Mary and Martha sent word to Jesus that Lazarus was sick, and before Jesus could get there, Lazarus had died. And the most profound thing that Jesus does when he arrives on the scene is, it says, and we miss it because it's such a simple verse, John 11:35. It says, Jesus wept. I mean, think about this. Let's make sure we get the context of this. This is the Son of God. This is the Messiah. This is the one person who showed up on the scene who could have fixed everything, and in fact, he does. He's going to heal Lazarus, but he arrives on the scene and he doesn't try to say profound things. He weeps with the family because he understood just what comfort is. Sometimes it's just crying with other people. Listen to what Romans 12 says. Rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. Sometimes all we need to do is just to be happy when people are happy, not to be jealous, not to think, I wish that would have happened to me, but just to be happy because something good happened to somebody else. But when something bad happens and they are down and they are going through grief and loss, one of the best things that we can do is just to walk through it with them and just to mourn and just to cry and sometimes just to weep with them. We don't need to say things. We just need to cry with them. In fact, the book of Proverbs gives us some warning about how we say things when people are going through difficult times. In fact, Proverbs 18:13 says, to answer before listening, just folly and shame. That means it's stupid. To talk, to open your mouth, especially in such a sensitive, delicate time, is folly and shame. Maybe you just need to stop and just just to listen. Sometimes we're not very comfortable with that. It's hard because it doesn't come out very well. There's maybe long periods of silence, and some of you, your personality it just bows up with that. I can't allow there to be silence, and silence is okay. It allows for listening. Or how about this Proverbs right here? The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint. And whoever has understanding is even-tempered. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent and discerning, if they hold their tongues. Proverbs reminds us that there is wisdom in just sometimes being quiet. Sometimes just holding our tongue and shutting our mouth. In fact, it, in a very humorous way, says you can even look smart if you'll just be quiet. Some of you need help with that. Some of you would just look smarter and wiser if you just closed your mouth more often. And some of you would be more comforting to people if you would just show up and be quiet. Or how about this Proverbs? The right word spoken at the right time is as beautiful as gold apples in a silver bowl. This incredible refreshment, this snack that's available to you. And Proverbs is comparing that to somebody being able to come up with the right words. Not just any words, not just words to fill up a space because we feel uncomfortable, but the right words, and to say the right words at the right time. To say them when it's appropriate, when it's not just sensitive, when it's not raw with grief and pain. To say the right words at the right time is an important thing, and we would all learn from that. If there were some things not to say, as we've mentioned, maybe there's some things that we could say. What would be some things that we could say to somebody that's going through some grief? Let me just give you some general things. One of the things that you can do is say things that are going to acknowledge their loss. Say something that would acknowledge their loss. I'm sorry, I know that person was special to you. I know your husband and wife, you guys have been together for a long time. I'm so sorry, I'm going to miss them as well. Just say something that acknowledges that they have gone through a loss. They need that. Because sometimes we don't want to acknowledge the loss that's involved with that. We'll even try to deny it ourselves when we're going through it. And we need to acknowledge it ourselves, and we need to be reminded of it when people come alongside of us and acknowledge that we have lost something or someone dear to us. Second thing is you validate their feelings. Because their feelings aren't good or bad or positive or negative. That's the way that their emotions are responding. And so it is good for us when we're walking through this painful time with someone to say, it's okay for you to feel that way. To give them permission, to validate the feelings they're going through, to normalize it. Say, that's normal what you're going through. That's okay for you to go through that. Like several years ago when I was talking with a person that had a spouse that had cheated on them. And they were telling me the story and talking about how they were struggling with anger. And they were somewhat surprised when I said, you ought to be angry. That's a normal response. They cheated on you. And I think maybe what they thought was that I would tell them, it's not appropriate to be angry. We ought to still be loving. Well, the truth is, it is appropriate to be angry when there's been loss and when we've been betrayed and when some injustice. It's very appropriate. It's godly to be angry at those kinds of things. Now, obviously, there's a time to address our anger and to channel it in the right direction. But it's okay to express that emotion. It's okay to be angry and to help people walk through that and say, you're all right, it's okay. You can tell me about your anger. You can tell me about your grief and your loss. It's okay for you to feel that way. One of the other things that you can say is anything that will express your desire to help. I'm here for you. I'll do whatever I can to help. I'll walk through this with you. I'm praying for you. I'll pray for you every day this week about this. I'm with you on this thing. Just expressing that they're not walking through this alone, that you are there with them. You can say anything that would express your desire to help. And then lastly, you offer to do something specific. Now, here's what we normally do. We normally will talk with someone and tell them we love them, and then we'll say, if you need anything, just call me. Well, the truth is, they're not going to call. They're not even going to remember that conversation because of all the emotion and stress that's going on in their life. And so don't just say, just call me. You offer to do something specific. You ask them, what do you need? How can I help with the kids? How about I bring dinner tomorrow? How about I arrange meals for the rest of the week? How about I come clean your house every Monday until you tell me to stop? Those are the kinds of things that people need to hear, not shallow words, not some seemingly profound bit of wisdom that's not even biblical, but to tell them, I'm here, and I'll bring you a lasagna tomorrow, and I'm going to come by and pick up the kids so you don't have to worry about it. And you come up with very tangible things that you can do to help. Listen to what Galatians 6:2, it kind of sums it up for us. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. What's the law of Christ? Jesus told us it's love God and love one another. The way that you can love one another is not to share some cliche with them when they're going through a difficulty. The greatest way that you can do that is you walk through their burden with them. You bear that burden with them. The next time someone's hurting and you don't know what to say, quite honestly, there may be a very good reason why. Because you don't need to say anything. You just go and be with them. And you cry with them. And you carry their burden. And it'll mean more than any cliche that you could ever say to them. Father, thank you for loving us. Thank you for loving us in a very tangible way. Not just saying that you love us, not just saying you care about us, but by taking care of our sin burden, by sending Jesus to die for us. And God, we are thankful that you are a God who knows grief and knows suffering. And you have felt that, and you walk us through that. And God, I'm praying that you would help our church, our community of believers, to be people that aren't content just to share empty thoughts and sayings with people to make us feel better, but to truly be the hands, the arms, the feet of Jesus, and to bear one another's burdens. Help us to do that in Jesus' name.